Hi everyone, this is Morgan, and I want to welcome you all into this brief overview of the psychosocial development of a very special person in my life, my dad. This is my dad, Robert. He is 65 years old and is newly retired. He was born and raised in the hollers of eastern Kentucky, specifically in Carter County. He still lives in eastern Kentucky with my mother, though they now reside in Clark County, in the Winchester-Lexington area. In general, I would describe him as a quiet and reserved person. It's not often that he talks about his life, so this was a unique experience for me to share this with him as his daughter, and now for me to share all of this with you guys. Robert, my dad, was born to Mary and Alfred Hicks, along with his 9 siblings, so there were 10 kids altogether. Prior to her death in 2017, Mary was the epitome of the matriarch of the family. She raised all 10 children with as much love and nurturing as she could manage. This, of course, was quite difficult, though, and older siblings often took on the role of caregiving so that she could provide for the smallest of the children. She was a very kind woman and also a devout Christian. Alfred, on the other hand, was extremely authoritarian towards all of the children and suffered extensively with serious mental illness. The family lived in rural environments that required brutally hard work from everyone. Some of the responsibilities that my dad held specifically included carrying water to their home because there was no running water, tending to the garden, which was their main food source, and chopping firewood for their wood-burning furnace, which was their only access to heat. It would not be until my dad was almost out of their house that they would have electricity and running water. These were expected chores at early ages, and any disobedience was met with harsh corporal punishment, as my dad described it. The family was also burdened by extreme poverty, and many of their basic needs went completely unmet. In general, his early years were filled with difficulty, and he endured a great deal of trauma. Despite his own struggles with mental illness and various other circumstances from a young age, my dad was adamant on being a more successful person and living a more fulfilling life than did his parents. In 1987, he met my mother, Susan. At the time, she was 19, and he was about 11 years her senior. At the time when they first met, he decided that it was a better choice to go as far as to lie to her about his age because of this big age gap. He decided to say that he was much younger than he actually was. Even so, they have been married for 32 years now. Over the course of this time, they had one child, me, and I have given them their only grandchild, my daughter, Jane, who is getting ready to be 6 years old. My dad's relationship with his parents has always been complicated. That's why he has always been so intent on building a stronger family than what he had growing up. He didn't really have a close relationship with his parents. However, my dad and I are very, very close and talk often. And he also had absolutely no relationship with his grandparents on either side. In comparison, he has been part of my daughter's life from the day that she was born. He was the second person besides my husband and I to have met her, and calls her, video chats, like everything that he possibly can to be part of her life, because it was something that he definitely lacked growing up. He is very proud to have set the foundation for a family that is so loving and supportive, despite the potential outcomes that his life could have had. In 1994, he graduated with his associates in nursing, which led to a long career in intensive care and dialysis at the VA hospital there in Lexington, Kentucky. He retired last year, and all he could really say about it was that he loves it and is thankful that he was able to retire when he did. He doesn't really feel retired, though, because he likes to say that my mom is getting her money's worth out of him in home renovations. He is adamant that his family is his greatest achievement and made all of his past struggles more than worth it. He wouldn't change a thing. When we talked about historical events that influenced his development, he was quick to discuss the experiences of his father first, especially during World War II. My dad feels very strongly that the trauma his father endured growing up had a significant impact on how he raised my dad and his siblings. This was a combination of extreme poverty, abuse, and complicated grief that he endured in his childhood. And this was due to him losing his older brother in the war, who was a pilot. His body was never recovered, and his older brother was essentially the most stable and father-like figure that he had in his life. My dad also talked about the impact of the civil rights movement, during which time he was a teenager. He was raised in a racially biased household and also witnessed a great deal of racism in his community. It was a very small, predominantly white Eastern Kentucky town. My dad also experienced the women's liberation movement of the 1960s and 70s. He is a big advocate for women, especially having had a daughter of his own to raise. He views women as the most important component of society. Through the interview with my dad, it was clear that many of his psychosocial developmental stages were impacted significantly. I chose the 4 that you see here because they really put into perspective the developmental timeline from his worst outcomes in his infancy and early childhood to the best outcomes that he has seen in his later years, and especially now in his final stage of development. These stages also seem to be the most important to him during our conversation. And each of these stages allowed me to have the clearest indications of specific problems that he had faced during that time. Despite the abundance of conflict throughout his life, I would say that he has entered this final stage of development with great integrity rather than despair. He has made great strides in improving his life circumstances and his health, and is resolute that he has absolutely no regrets. He speaks with great certainty that his own suffering instilled a greater desire to live and provide a better life for the future of his family.